afternoon, and welcome to this week's episode of LevelUp Cyber. My name is Tony Bryan, the Executive Director of CyberUp, and your host for this show. Really excited. I feel like I haven't recorded the show in a couple weeks. Had a little bit of time off, but excited to be back in the studio. I'm really looking forward to today's conversations with Susan Klement with AT&T. Susan, welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for having me.
So Susan and I have met a couple times at different events and just being in the networking St. Louis cyber scene, but I've had an opportunity to get to know over the last couple of years. And what I've met and come to grow is a passionate leader, a committed individual in the cybersecurity space, and for that, and willing to roll up your sleeves and help others, right? So kudos to you and appreciation.
Thank you for that.
Things. So, I know you, but I'd love to give everybody to have a chance to get to know you. So I'd love to hear your origin story. How did you get into cyber? How did you break in? And we'll get started there.
Sure. I started out a long time ago as a programmer and then moved over into project management, did project management for software development for several years, and then moved over into hardware infrastructure. And from there, over into security because I've always been interested in it and wanted to do it. And I was lucky enough that I had a former boss who had moved before and knew that I would be willing to kind of jump in and get into those details and push for security. So while helping the teams that needed some organization. So that's how I got into cybersecurity.
So as we get ready for today's show, and the topic of today is the idea of being technical versus not technical, right? I think there's been a lot of, I don't want to say misinformation because I feel like that's a bad word and it gives it a negative connotation, but I think there's definitely been a spectrum, right, of like what would be technical versus what isn't technical, because there are so many different roles, right? You've got your risk and compliance, you've got some auditing, you could go even as basic as kind of awareness training, which there's zero need for technical skills behind that, right? So to help kind of level set the expectation, because we're going to dive into that idea of technical versus not technical and how you could build a really successful career by not being the most technical person in the room, but let's kind of set expectations. So in your mind, what would be super technical and what would be kind of on the front end of not technical?
Right. So super technical would, in my mind, you're in the tools, you're configuring the scans, you're writing scripts, you're basically doing more development work. And I feel like I sell myself a little short because when I say to like our architects and our developers that I'm not as technical, they often say, you're kind of technical, but I don't get into the details. I know what needs to happen and I know who's really good at doing that and I can pull them together to form a solution. But I'm not writing any programming. I'm not configuring tools, things like that.
Yeah, the thing that kind of pops in my brain is just a quick kind of point of reference and I lean towards a certification. OSCP, right? Was it offensive security, something, I don't know, cybersecurity professional? There you go.
Yeah.
That's a 24-hour certification where you're trying to solve technical problems to attain that certification, right? Like to me, that is the top end of technical. You're committing to understand all of those things. And to your point, the bottom end of that is security awareness. Like there are front end salespeople that do cybersecurity sales that are good relationship managers, but not necessarily technical. And they're going to pass that person to an in-house, more technical person to walk them through those demos, right? So that's just
right. They can answer high-level questions, but they pull someone in for the more detailed technical questions, right?
I probably could talk enough in front of a room about concepts and ideas of the security. I feel like I have a solid understanding of the world and the ins and outs and the whys. But for me, the how would fall all apart, right? You put me behind a keyboard and say, here's a Splunk or a Metasploit tool, go crazy and try to figure it out. Clueless. And I've tried it a couple times for capture the flag events where, you're doing that. And I'm waving surrender flags. Come help me. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes.
So, maybe that's another good. If you're out actively trying to find CTFs, you're probably a little bit more technical than somebody that wouldn't be doing.
If you're giving advice, say, on how to remediate an issue, that seems more technical to me. But that's something that we have on our teams. I can point them in that direction, but I can't do it.
So let's kind of unpack, that a little bit more. The idea of, the importance of somebody who would be in a cybersecurity team that's on the more non-technical side, right? What would you, in your opinion, be some advantages around kind of the technical versus non-technical roles, right? Because I think they're complementary to one another. But from your perspective,
this is something that comes up a lot. Like the technical folks on our team, they are very interested in solving a problem. They're very interested in what the technology can do for them, and they can kind of fall down a rabbit hole a little bit. Like, oh, this is a new technique that I haven't tried, or a new feature of this tool that we can. Maybe we could implement that. And, you need somebody that says, hey, we have a problem that we're solving right now, and we can mark that down and say later, come back to it, and maybe have a project where we look in these new features and techniques. But right now we need to make sure we're solving this problem that we have in front of us. And sometimes it's just helpful to have somebody that can rein that in and get back to the problem, keep an eye on the dates when we have to have something completed in order to either meet a regulation or meet just something that we told our customers or internal or external customers or clients that we would do. Somebody has to keep an eye on those technical details. And then, all the various parts of a project, there's the technical stuff, but you got to communicate to your clients, and you've got to make sure that your documentation is updated, and all of those parts that you need to make sure happen in order for the full solution to not only be implemented, but be useful going forward.
I always kind of look at the idea of like a project manager, right? Pops in my head because, and everything I've always been told is that technical IT folks, whether you be cyber or code, oftentimes aren't the most managerial, right? Or they're very good at writing code, and those are kind of their skill set, but there's always, it doesn't always translate into good people management or leader management, right. Project management. So I definitely could see where that's a huge role, where somebody maybe with an ITIL or PMP could come in, lead Scrum discussions, and really kind of facilitate everybody's like projects to get to an end goal and really track. Let's say I'm new. I just graduated college, or I just finished a program like CyberUp, and I'm listening today, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. I don't feel super technical. Maybe that's a little bit of imposter syndrome, or maybe it's just the truth. Where should I start, or where should I start looking to either gain some skills in this non-technical background, or where are some kind of roles or functions that you would kind of push me to so I can start looking at where I would go?
Yeah, and I see a lot of, when I see project managers that are in the cybersecurity area, they started out, usually they started out someplace else, either in software development or networking, something like that. So they get kind of a feel for how these projects work. And then they've seen issues come up and seen how they had to be resolved. And so it's a good way to move into saying, okay, I'm interested in that. And then just volunteering. If you're at work and there's a project that you're working on and somebody's like, well, we need to make sure that, the security organization is involved. You say, hey, let me run interference there. Let me not run interference, do that connection. And just get to know the people and let people know that, hey, this is something I'm really interested in. People, if you're interested in doing a job, and you're actually interested in learning, people like that. They want you to come in and do stuff that you're, going to actually be interested in, and you're actually going to work a little harder because you want to learn how this works. And they'll kind of include you on projects. And then when an opportunity comes up where you can move into that as well, you see a lot of that. People move from other areas into cybersecurity. For if you're just kind of wanting to start out in the security area, you can just look at, kind of low-level project manager jobs, or technical writing jobs sometimes is a good way to do that. You don't have to know all the details, but you have to be able to, work with other people to get that documentation correctly. Just kind of letting people know what you're interested in and continue to do training. You can do the high-level training as well. It doesn't have to be, I know Python. I don't know Python. I don't know. When I was a programmer, I did COBOL. So I'm very out of date in my programming languages. So but just even having any of that experience is a good background to say, I know what you're doing, what you need.
So let's kind of take a step back and back to the idea of a college student or a recent graduate. I'm trying to break in. What are some things I could look for as a way to maybe grow some non-technical skills, right? Or what would be some, again, back to the roles in which I would look for. I'm just trying to break in as an entry-level person. And I've been told all the stuff, but where would be a good place for me to start looking for some of these non-technical roles?
Even some like training of cybersecurity awareness. If you're good at training people and taking them through, you've got materials. There's lots of materials out there about how to be a good online citizen and how to avoid scams and but some people need somebody to walk them through that and give them some practical examples. So being able to do that kind of training, it's a relatively entry-level job that you can find and work through that. Another good area is I'm sorry, my brain just stopped working for a moment. Another good thing to do is to look at kind of compliance stuff, where you're kind of documenting what people are doing and if they're meeting the requirements. There's a lot of regulation around cybersecurity and what kind of protections you're putting in place, and that you need to track. Are people doing that? So that is something that, you can get into without having a lot of technical, people will show you if they're doing it or not. You kind of go through and say, is this happening? Are these teams, do they need support in helping to figure out how to do this work? That's a good way to get into it as well.
That's great advice. As you've kind of leaned into this and you've mapped out your own career, right? And you've had a great run, leading teams, leading projects within a large organization, which is great. And you've probably had many iterations there. And I noticed, just your background of writing and editing, I'm sure is a very transferable skill. What skills have you taken from past experiences that you think really help you on your day-to-day function to be a good kind of contributing project manager, leader within the very technical problems, right? Like that part of,
organizing is the big one, right? You make it organized, you make sure that you have a good list of everything that needs to be done and who's going to do it and how you're going to get that done and make sure that these things happen when they need to happen. That's useful anywhere. So I had that for a lot. The other big thing that I like is, bringing people together to work together, like who have different skill sets, saying, oh, I know a person who's really good in this coding area that could maybe help us. That is very helpful and gets a lot of work done, honestly, because people don't always, sometimes, and not always, but a lot of the technical folks I know, they're busy, they're writing their code, they're doing their configurations, whatever they're doing. And they don't necessarily know who else can help them, who else can give them ideas that will help them solve a problem. So being able to meet a lot of different people and know what they do and how they can help and how you can help them, like maybe, I can find somebody else to help you. And then maybe next time you'll come over and help us with this problem, is tremendously valuable.
I've always heard, the speculations, nobody likes cybersecurity folks, right? Like you're finding the bad things. I've always heard the horror stories of like walking down the hall and they know you're the cyber person. Like, oh no, right? Like, so there's this fear of the unknown because you're always trying to catch that person or,
right.
Trying to catch that person doing bad. And like,
we're the people that say no.
And I've never seen that, right? Like, and I'm sure it's happened and there are people out there, but like, the non-technical aspect of this, I would assume it plays such a huge role. Like what things have you found kind of with that example there that you've been able to bridge and maybe mend some of those relationships? And how have you done that, through non-technical folks and maybe dispel the myth that all security people are bad and trying to, take away all of their fun toys that they can play with.
Right. Well, what I like to do is point out that we're trying to protect you these are big issues that could come up. You can lose a lot of data, you can lose money, you can lose time if something gets broken. And we want to protect you from that. We're looking to support you to make sure that all this work that you're doing is good and is out there and is helpful. Some people, I do feel like sometimes, especially on the security side, people do say, oh no, we don't want you to do anything because that's unsafe. And obviously it's helpful to have somebody that's kind of in the middle to say, yeah, that's unsafe, but we have to let people do their work. We have to let, there has to be a business to protect, and then they have to do some things in order to have that. So to kind of find that middle ground is helpful to say, okay, I know if we were 100% safe, no one would ever see anything that we wrote or any of our data. And then the people on the business side are saying, but then we can't contact people. We can't sell them anything. We don't know what they want because we have all their data locked up too tight. So we're really protecting both sides. You got to find that balance.
Well, I think the hard part's always that you're trying to always protect everything, but also make sure you're not slowing down operations or other people's needs just to do business. So, there's a fine line of non-technical talk to explain to people the reasons and the whys of some of this stuff and how it is an impact to what you just alluded to, the risks that are associated with it. And then there's a technical stuff that I think maybe some of those conversations would be harder when somebody's talking more about the ones and the twos and, the protocols and like what you have to do with it versus the kind of broad general explanation of like, hey, we're here to help. I don't like the phrase of security is a team sport or whatever is a team sport. It's overplayed, right? Everything's a team sport technically, but I could definitely see where it's such an important part, right? To really be that, I'm going to use a word as like a voice of reason, to take very technical, difficult things and package it in a way that is universally understood across most organizations, and then try to be that bridge to foster good relationships within internal teams just to get jobs and work done.
Right. Have you realized? So we want to make your job. We don't want to make it harder if we can avoid it, but we have to make sure we protect the company and the data.
Yeah. And I think even just that bridge of just helping people understand why some of the things that you do, I think is such an important part of, right? Like, why do I patch this stupid software every single month? Oh, like it just seems like a waste of time. Well, I don't know. Like there usually patches are good, right? And there's reasons why you're going to go do those things. So definitely like that idea. As you kind of look ahead to your own, and I recently learned about a role, was new to me at a recent conference, the BISO, the Business Information Security Officer, right? So, let's unpack that. When you're in your brain or your kind of your words, what is a BISO and what does that kind of role serve for you?
Yeah, that's a big one that is really becoming very popular right now, and it kind of encompasses a lot of what I've been saying in that it is kind of that liaison between the business and the tech side, and to try to make that to be the voice of the customer over on the tech side and to let the customer know, hey, these are things we have to do. And here's why. So to kind of keep that smooth, it's actually a very interesting role. I like it.
I've heard a couple different, like some BISOs are market specific, some BISOs are industry or kind of segment specific. So I feel like it's a pretty universal role with the intent is to help bridge the technical stuff to the non-technical stuff and really explain the reason behind it. Do you think, so BISO's new, I feel like that timing is pretty much in line with legislature changes nationally or, to create more transparency and more involvement of board of directors for profits, where I think a lot of this stuff, right, opens up apertures for non-technical people because there's going to be a need as this continues to grow. What do you think excites you the most over the next 5 to 10 years for this type of function, for still cyber roles, but less technical cyber roles, and what impact do you think they have on the kind of business community moving forward?
That's an excellent point because the cybersecurity landscape is not going to get any less complicated. In fact, it's going to get significantly more complicated with AI and quantum computing coming up that have, are going to break kind of a lot of the stuff that we've already done. And it's going to impact everyone. We're seeing, you see it all the time, more data being stolen, more breaches. I don't know how many, I could probably have 5 or 6 or 7, monitoring systems from breaches that have gotten into data that I've had recently. And that's probably only going to get worse. And like I said, more complicated as the tools that people are using are going to get more complicated. So while everybody is seeing it a lot more and things are getting complicated, the role for somebody who can kind of go in between is just going to get more and more crucial, because we're going to need to make sure that there's probably going to be more impacts on the business about what they're going to have to do as they're doing their day-to-day work and developing their regular business, but also having that protection in place. And, somebody that can explain, hey, this is why we need to do it. And also here are the exact steps that you need to take, because, not everybody has time to learn all of the details about the security information, but they may have to do something. So if we've got somebody that can kind of walk them through that, you don't have to understand all the details to say, hey, we've got this file that you need to install or whatever, whatever the steps are that the solution has come up with to kind of help them make sure that they're protecting their business, all the data in the company while, trying to do their regular jobs.
The WashU program I did a couple of years ago, we did a lot of simulations around our goal. We were CISOs and trying to make recommendations to our board of directors for investments. That was through, security awareness.
Right.
I was buying software, with some strategy. And it was an interesting simulation because it showed the impact, right? It's we chose this thing and there was our cost went up and our cost of goods went down. So all those things that you wouldn't think through, right? I think the general people would think I'm going to buy this tool. Okay, well, there's a trickle down aspect of this, and specifically for the board of directors who you're trying to get this funding from, you've got to be able to package that in a way that it makes sense and focuses on what they're worried about, right? Dollars, cents, revenue, profits, EBITDA, earnings before income taxes, right? Cost of goods sold. So every time you're adding a tool, your cost of goods sold go up. So it is all our consideration.
Right, and these tools are not cheap. Whether you purchase them or develop them in-house or some hybrid, they cost money. So you need to make sure that you're doing the most effective for the, I say least amount of money possible, but that's not going to be a small amount of money.
Yeah. Well, I always, I've kind of kicked back in my head over the last couple, especially 2024. It's been a weird market, right? I think teams have kind of sized and shrunk, so it's been a weird time. And I don't know if it's a combo of just cautiousness to the economy, if it's advances in AI that we're kind of minimizing roles. I don't necessarily feel that strongly that that's necessarily the case. I think it's more a conservative mindset of what they're trying to, spending wise, not, conservative on what they want to spend and just trying to stack the coffers of cash to make sure if something really bad goes, you're ready. But it's really hard to make decisions, right? If you're focusing on that. So that's where these BSOs, the rules that are coming down from Senate and Congress of we need to increase this because at the end of the day, there's a lot of risks and things that come up, right? When I think of companies like AT&T or, that has a ton of data or whatever, bad things happen. There's a pretty big impact that kind of trickles down across the board for everybody. So,
right. And there's so many different people that are coming after companies, there's just, common thieves that just want to steal and get some money. There's state actors that are, at AT&T, we support communication system. That's a big deal. Any kind of utility is going to have those bigger bad nation state actors that are trying to break things down. You got to.
So as you look, so let's say I'm in high school. We're even going to take it further back. We've talked college grads, we've talked boot camp. So I'm in high school. I'm listening to this. Man, I kind of want to do cyber when I get older. What advice would you give to those kids that are aspiring to they're not the ones and twos coders, but they like the idea of, I think the other part, and I'm going to tangent here, I think what attracts me to cyber is it's mission oriented. That's military me that I think likes the mission and the purpose. And I think is a much broader perspective, I think, in life. Most people want purpose. This is a role and function that you have the ability to have that every single day, right? So I think is why it's such an attractive draw for individuals. So I'm in high school. I'm meeting the Susans of the world, and I'm asking questions about what I want to be when I grow up, right? So what advice do you give to these young folks that are maybe listening to this today and maybe have reservations to going into a career like this because they're out of their own fear of kind of the technical side of it? What advice would you give to them of where they would maybe go to learn these things, or of how to become you?
Yeah. I think what you really need to do is make sure that you're thinking about why you want to do it. Because that makes a big difference. Like you say, I also really think this is important work that supports everyday people. When I do cybersecurity for AT&T, I'm not just supporting AT&T customers, I'm supporting the country, which I love. So, once you have that why, and then you say, well, what can I do? If you're interested in learning more, there are, I belong to a women in cybersecurity group, for instance, but there are other kind of groups like that you can go to, go out on LinkedIn. Even if you're in high school, you can go on LinkedIn and kind of look around and see people that are doing what you want to do, and just kind of ask them, questions, or just read and follow up. Find people that are, doing a BSO role, doing a project management role, a program management role, that are organizing the work, and reach out to. I would love it if somebody reached out to me from high school and said, I want to do this, and how did you do this, and what do you like about it, and where did you go? I do think that there's still value in doing a college career, and maybe doing my degree was in computer information systems. I did do a lot of programming, but other than that, it wasn't super technical. It was a business degree, so that was helpful. But also, apprenticeship programs like CyberUp does, those are very helpful as well, because you can get some hands-on, get into the details work, and meet people from around the area that are doing this work, and get out into businesses and really see what the work is like, because you're doing it.
I've never trashed anybody's choice of how they gain skills, right? Like their college is a great option. We're a great option, right? And I find it's just, find what's going to work best for you and give you the best opportunity to be successful in life. And I don't think there's not one right path for every single person, but I do think there's a right approach in how you're interacting with the people that are around you and how you break into it. I think.
Agreed. Yeah, if you're interested and you're curious and you want to learn, people will notice that and want to interact back with you and want to help you.
The degree, the piece of paper, oftentimes is a check the box or a formality you would need to do or qualify for something, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not the determinant of somebody's success, especially in this job, I think, for sure. Yes. Great advice. And I would also say be careful what you ask for, right? There are a lot of at CAPS, Career and Professional Studies, is a great program for high school students. They've got an IT entrepreneurship program for juniors and seniors. Great model where you get to go interact with business communities and technical professionals and start to ask questions. Obviously, your career and technical education is a great way for high school students to start to learn this stuff and be introduced to industry professionals. So, there's a lot of opportunities. Some more in other states, and then some in others. Not all school districts create equally, but there's a lot of good options where somebody could go and find.
Oh yeah, it's all about how you learn or how you want to do it. Whichever way is best, works best for you, and gets you the skills and gets you into the people that you want to meet. That's the best way to do it, right? So if you work better in apprenticeship mode, there's a lot to. I like that idea. I kind of wish I'd known about it when I was younger. Maybe there wasn't as much. Because it is, you get to actually, because, and when I learned good stuff in college, but it's different when you're actually in the workforce. The workforce is bigger. There's a lot more information out there. So having that apprenticeship and somebody to kind of walk you through that is also, I think, a very valuable thing.
I push that anybody, regardless of skill path, benefits from a 1-year structured onboarding system with a mentor, with additional certifications and support. right? Like, period. I don't care if you're
Agreed.
80 years old or 18. Every person is going to be better off in the end with all those support systems in place.
Yeah.
So,
and I like certifications. They're good. They're very useful.
Yeah.
You learn a lot while you're studying for them, and it's really helpful to kind of focus you. So I agree with that for sure.
So everybody gets the last same question. We're at time. It always goes fast. I told you 4 or 5. The next thing you know, we're done. So, what advice would you give to somebody looking to level up their cybersecurity career?
Yeah, find somebody who is doing what you want to do, and with respectfully for their time, ask them, how did you get here, and what do you recommend? Like we just said, I like the certification route because that's how I think. So you can see what certifications would be helpful. Just look around and see. The one other thing that I would add is it doesn't have to be the same thing that you've been doing. I moved into program management. I was already doing project and program management, but you can look around and say, hey, I want to do a BSO role, for instance, or whatever. It's something slightly different, and see how the skills that you already have apply to a slightly different job, and see how you can move into that as well. Because, I think as long as you're learning stuff, it's interesting to do. So that's my advice.
Yeah. Learn and grow. I'm a big fan of that. Lifetime learner, lifetime grower. So, well, Susan, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciated the insight and the topic, right? I think it's, as people transition into it and they're really trying to find their space in this land, I think it's a good reminder that you don't always have to be the best coder or the best hacker to feel like you have to get the job, right? Like, there are opportunities and roles that you can do that without being the most technically proficient person.
And they're needed roles. Like one last thing I'd add is that by organizing a lot of this work and kind of pulling all that stuff together, I allow the technical people to focus on what they're doing. They can focus on solving their problems, not figuring out how to make everything else work.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much to you, Susan, for joining us. Thank you to everybody for listening. Always enjoy these shows. I hope everybody has a great end of their year and a great holiday if we don't see you. So thank you guys.
Happy holidays.